15 years. That's how long I'd given to TechVantage, my ideas, my late nights, my loyalty. 15 years boiled down to a manila folder slid across a cold conference room table. After 15 years with TechVantage, we're restructuring your position, Marjorie Thompson announced, her voice laced with that fake corporate sympathy you could smell a mile away. She sat across from me, hands folded neatly, with Denise from HR nodding along like a bobblehead. The performance was flawless, regretful smiles, carefully rehearsed lines about a new direction, and a severance package neatly tucked inside that folder they couldn't wait for me to open. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just nodded thoughtfully and accepted the folder without even glancing at it. They expected me to break down, to beg, to rage against the unfairness of it all. After all, who would hire a 55-year-old woman in an industry that worshipped 20-somethings in hoodies over experience and wisdom? But they didn't know what I knew. They didn't know that a month ago, a misfired email had landed in my inbox, a thread not meant for my eyes. A thread outlining a plan to quietly cut me out and claim my life's work as the company's property. They didn't know that I had spent the past few weeks preparing for this exact moment. Down to the minute, Marjorie's confidence grew with my silence. "We'll need you to clean out your desk by Friday," she said, her voice gaining that unmistakable sharpness of someone who thought they'd just won. "Please return your laptop, your key card, and your phone before you leave." I smiled politely. Of course. As I stood, I caught a glimpse through the glass walls of the executive conference room, where Victor Lawson, the CEO himself, was animatedly pacing through a presentation on Q3 revenue projections. The same Victor who had once stood on stage at an industry conference, basking in applause for my work, referring to me only as one of our researchers. I kept walking, past the glass offices, past the polished smiles, past the people who would pretend not to know me by next week. Back at my desk, I didn't pack up right away. I sat there, phone in hand, and sent a single text. "It's happening. Friday's my last day." The reply came within seconds. Perfect timing. Dinner tonight to finalize the details. I leaned back in my chair, looking around the office one last time. The irony was almost too much to bear, how they thought they were discarding me like some obsolete piece of tech, never realizing that by Friday, the real power shift would already be in motion. Tonight, I would meet with the man who could help me turn this quiet betrayal into something much, much louder. And by Monday, TechVantage would finally understand what it meant to underestimate a woman who had nothing left to lose. Dinner was at Meridian, the kind of upscale place where the lighting was soft, the wine list longer than the food menu, and privacy was guaranteed. I spotted Gregory Sullivan immediately, seated in a discreet alcove tucked behind elegant Japanese screens. CEO of Precision Systems, TechVantage's biggest competitor, and tonight, my partner in the most beautifully orchestrated betrayal the tech world had ever seen. He rose when he saw me, his handshake firm, his smile knowing. "They actually did it," Greg said as we settled into our seats, his voice low with disbelief. I half expected Victor to pull some last-minute stunt. I shrugged, picking up my glass of water. Victor never saw the storm coming. He thought the battle was over when he signed my severance papers. Greg laughed softly. "Their loss. Our appetizers arrived, but neither of us touched them. Instead, he slid a sleek folder across the table. All the paperwork's ready. Patent rights, licensing agreement, signing bonus, equity, everything we discussed." I opened it briefly, though I already knew the terms by heart. Months ago, when the first cracks in TechVantage's loyalty showed, I had started working on something they couldn't touch, an improved version of the distributed processing algorithm, developed entirely on my personal time, with my personal equipment. What they didn't know was that I'd quietly filed a patent for it under my own name. And now, Precision Systems would own exclusive licensing rights, and I would sit at their table as Chief Innovation Officer. Greg watched me carefully. "You understand what this means, right? Once we announce it Monday morning, there's no turning back." I smiled, feeling that slow, simmering satisfaction deep in my chest. "Greg, I'm not just ready. I've been ready for months." He raised his glass, to new beginnings, and to showing the world who really built TechVantage's empire. I clinked my glass against his. The sound sharp and electric in the quiet alcove. For the first time in years, I wasn't hiding in someone else's shadow. I wasn't going to ask for permission or hope someone gave me credit. This time, I would take it. As we finalized the details over dinner, I felt the weight of 15 years lift from my shoulders. No more second guessing, no more pretending not to notice the way my contributions were minimized, rewritten, or conveniently forgotten. This was bigger than me now. Bigger than revenge. It was about every woman who'd ever been told to be grateful for a seat at a table she built with her own hands. And soon, very soon, the entire industry would know it too. Friday came faster than I expected. One moment, I was shaking Greg's hand across a table at Meridian, and the next, I was standing in my office, cardboard box in hand, the life I had built over 15 years packed into neat, forgettable piles. Colleagues passed my open door with quick, guilty glances. Some stopped to mumble half-hearted goodbyes. Most didn't. Word travels fast when blood hits the water. And nobody at Tech Vantage wanted to be caught showing sympathy for a soon-to-be ghost. I kept my smile polite, professional, as I taped the last box shut. Family photos, awards no one ever cared to ask about. A coffee mug my team had custom made for me last Christmas. Each item a tiny monument to the years I'd spent being indispensable but invisible. By noon, my official exit interview with Denise was a blur of boilerplate HR language and clipped formalities. She slid the final NDA across the table, her voice robotic. I signed it without hesitation, making sure to emphasize the wording as I repeated it aloud. Any intellectual property developed within the scope of my employment. Using company resources. During company time, her pen scratched across her checklist without so much as a raised eyebrow. They were already looking past me, toward their bright new, youthful, future. I didn't bother correcting their mistake. They would find out soon enough. When I finally stepped out of Tech Vantage's polished glass headquarters, a strange calm washed over me. No anger, no sadness, just the sharp, electric anticipation of what was about to happen. Saturday and Sunday were a study in patience. I kept my phone close but didn't obsessively check it. I met friends for brunch, walked the trails behind my house, cooked myself a proper dinner for once. I was still savoring my glass of wine Sunday night when Greg's text popped up. Press release goes live at 7 a.m. sharp. Get ready. Monday morning dawned crisp and clear, almost theatrically perfect. I slipped into my new charcoal gray suit, tailored sharp enough to cut, and rode to Precision Systems headquarters in a black town car that pulled up to the curb with military precision. By the time I arrived, the news had already detonated across the tech world. Greg greeted me at the entrance with a grin. "You're trending number 3 on tech news this morning," he said, holding the door open like a man escorting royalty. And climbing. My new office, floor-to-ceiling windows, genuine leather chairs, a view that stretched halfway across the city, felt like stepping into a different lifetime. Gone was the battered cubicle, the passive-aggressive memos, the endless need to fight for credit that was rightfully mine. Here, my name was on the door. My title was etched into the plaque. My work was celebrated, not siphoned away behind closed doors. I had just set my bag down when my phone buzzed again. "Miguel, complete chaos here. What did you do?" I couldn't help the laugh that slipped out. I typed back. "Check your personal email. You'll want to see the offers." Each of my 6 engineers, the same brilliant team Tech Vantage had thoughtlessly tried to scatter, had personalized job offers waiting in their inboxes. Senior roles, big raises, real respect. Meanwhile, 8 miles away at Tech Vantage, pandemonium was setting in. Victor Lawson had shown up expecting a normal Monday morning. Instead, he found the company's legal department camped outside his office, red-faced and panicking over the news. The press release was brutally clear. Precision Systems had acquired exclusive rights to a revolutionary distributed processing algorithm, developed by Dr. Kira Jennings, their newly appointed Chief Innovation Officer. The wording was elegant, cutting, and legally airtight. There was no mention of Tech Vantage anywhere, because legally, they had no claim anymore. At 9:15 a.m., my phone lit up again. This time, an email from Victor himself. The subject line, "Urgent, please call me." I didn't even open it. I just forwarded it to Precision Systems' legal team and got back to work. By 10:30 a.m., Miguel was feeding me updates like a war correspondent. Legal's pulling every file with your name on it. IT rolled the research division's servers into a secure room. It's a total lockdown. I could practically picture Victor pacing, sweating, demanding answers that no one could give him. The board was already calling emergency meetings. Investors were blowing up their phones, spooked by the sudden uncertainty surrounding Tech Vantage's flagship product. By noon, it got worse. Tech Vantage's stock had plummeted 7% in just a few hours, while Precision Systems' stock shot up 12%. 3 different industry journals had already published breathless think pieces dissecting the unprecedented coup. I sat back in my chair, sipping my coffee, watching it all unfold like a perfectly written script. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every silent engineer, every overlooked mind who'd been shoved aside by people who didn't understand the value they were destroying. Greg poked his head into my office around 2 p.m., a wide grin stretching across his face. "You're a legend already. You know that? Board's talking about making you the face of our next marketing campaign." I chuckled. Let's take it one step at a time. Across the city, Victor scrambled to save face. He called an all-hands meeting, trying to project confidence, spinning some nonsense about defending our intellectual property vigorously. But even from a distance, I could feel the tension bleeding through the walls of Tech Vantage. Employees were updating their LinkedIn profiles en masse. Junior developers were texting my old teammates, asking about openings at Precision Systems. And Victor, poor Victor. He was clinging to a ship that was already sinking fast. By late afternoon, I got another message from Miguel. "Rumor is they're talking about suing you." I smiled, forwarding it straight to legal, who replied within minutes. "Let them try. Your documentation is impeccable. Every email, every log, every timestamp, every improvement made on my own time, with my own equipment." They had nothing. At 5 p.m., as the sun dipped low behind the skyline, I stood by the window of my new office, watching the city light up beneath me. 15 years ago, I would have killed for a moment like this, standing tall, fully seen, fully valued, and yet, standing there now, I realized it wasn't triumph I felt most. It was freedom. Freedom from needing their approval. Freedom from being small so others could feel big. Freedom from carrying an empire on my back while they reaped the rewards. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. Because while Tech Vantage was scrambling to salvage the wreckage, I was already building something better. Something smarter. Something that no one could ever take away from me again. By Tuesday morning, the fallout had reached a new level of brutal. Miguel kept me updated with a steady stream of texts, each one painting a picture more chaotic than the last. Servers being hauled into locked rooms. Developers looking for escape routes. Senior managers walking around like stunned deer caught in headlights. Tech Vantage wasn't just panicking, it was bleeding out in real time. Victor, desperate to maintain control, had ordered the legal team to draft a lawsuit against me by noon. But what he didn't realize, or maybe refused to believe, was that every move they made only dug the hole deeper. The documentation I'd left behind was flawless. Every project file, every password, every transition note had been meticulously cataloged, not out of kindness, but as a final, undeniable record of good faith. Evidence, proof that when they tried to smear me later, and they would, I had already covered every angle. At 2 p.m., the board called an emergency meeting. Miguel's updates read like a disaster novel unfolding in slow motion. Investors were dialing in one after another, furious about the intellectual property crisis and the sudden free fall of their stock. Nobody cared about Victor's excuses anymore. They cared about numbers, about liability, about the simple, ugly math of losing the very thing that had made Tech Vantage valuable. That same afternoon, I sat in a polished conference room at Precision Systems, briefing Greg and our legal team on the inbound licensing inquiries. Companies that had once proudly aligned with Tech Vantage were now lining up, terrified of being caught in the crossfire. Dataflow Systems was first, then Mid-Atlantic Analytics, then a half-dozen more. They weren't even waiting for Tech Vantage to sort itself out. They were jumping ship. Negotiating licensing deals with us before the smoke had even cleared. Miguel's next message made me pause. Victor just announced an aggressive internal rebuild plan during the emergency meeting. He claims they'll replicate the functionality within 6 months. I actually laughed. 6 months. It had taken me 3 years of deep work. Late nights, coffee-fueled weekends, and the brilliant collaboration of a hand-picked team to build the original algorithm. And Victor thought he could slap something together in half a year like he was assembling an IKEA bookshelf. The industry wasn't buying it either. By Thursday, 2 major tech publications had published scathing exposés, digging into TechVantage's mismanagement and the catastrophic mishandling of their IP strategy. Anonymous sources, no doubt including some of my former colleagues, painted a vivid picture of internal chaos, leadership arrogance, and breathtaking short-sightedness. That evening, Denise from the same woman who had so cheerfully pushed my severance package across the table, called my new office. Her voice was tight, brittle. She spoke in careful legalese, trying to find some ground to stand on. We believe there may have been a misunderstanding about ownership rights regarding the algorithm. She said. There's no misunderstanding, I replied evenly. The patent is mine, filed independently, developed independently, awarded independently, and any discussions moving forward will have to go through Precision Systems' legal department. There was a beat of silence so heavy it felt like a physical thing pressing through the line. Then a clipped, defeated, understood. Later that night, I sat on the balcony of my apartment, glass of wine in hand, watching the city lights shimmer below me. The satisfaction should have been overwhelming. In some ways, it was, but there was something else too, a heaviness, a quiet kind of sadness. I hadn't wanted to destroy TechVantage. I had wanted them to recognize my value before it was too late. I had wanted them to do the right thing without needing to be forced. But they hadn't. And now, the reckoning was unstoppable. By Friday, the situation was unsalvageable. TechVantage's board had forced Victor to resign. Effective immediately. No grand farewell. No legacy tour. Just a terse internal email that leaked to the press within hours. Marjorie Thompson and the head of legal followed him out the door before sunset. Their exits weren't graceful either. Rumor had it security was involved. Miguel, bless him, sent me a play-by-play as the dominoes fell. Victor looked like he was about to pass out when they read the board's statement. Marjorie cried. Legal tried to blame IT. Total implosion. In the meantime, I was wrapping up my first full week at Precision Systems. My days were packed with strategy meetings, patent integration workshops, product roadmap sessions. For the first time in my career, every word I said in a meeting was actually heard. Ideas were discussed on their merit, not dismissed based on who spoke them. It was a new reality, a better one. And every time I thought about the broken conference rooms and panicked leadership back at TechVantage, I felt not guilt, but clarity. They had done this to themselves. That afternoon, Greg stopped by my office, a triumphant glint in his eye. TechVantage's attorneys just reached out to open licensing discussions, he said, almost gleeful. They're ready to talk terms. What terms did we offer them? I asked, though I already knew the answer. He grinned. 3 times the industry standard rate. And full public acknowledgement of you as the inventor. They'll choke on that acknowledgement, I said, laughing. Greg nodded. They already are, but they don't have a choice. And they know it. Their investors are screaming for solutions. Fast. When Greg left, I sat back and looked out over the city again. Only this time, the sadness was gone. In its place was something fiercer. Sharper. Recognition. Not revenge. Not anymore. Recognition for every late night they took for granted. Every innovation they exploited. Every ounce of brilliance they squeezed dry and discarded without a second thought. And somewhere deep inside TechVantage's crumbling executive boardrooms, the realization was sinking in. They hadn't just lost an employee. They had lost the heartbeat of their future, and they hadn't even noticed until it was too late. As the sun dipped below the skyline, painting everything in deep gold and shadow, I raised my glass in a quiet toast. Not to them. To myself. To the woman they underestimated. To the legacy they tried to erase. To the beginning of something far greater than any of them could have imagined. And by Monday morning, when my former team officially joined me at Precision Systems, the final blow would land, not out of anger, but out of sheer, unstoppable brilliance. Because the future was already here. And it didn't have their name on it anymore. Monday morning arrived with a sense of inevitability. Like the final act of a play everyone had seen coming but no one could stop. Precision Systems lobby buzzed with quiet energy as my team, my real team now, walked through the glass doors for their first official day. Miguel, Anita, Jordan, Tess, Marcus, and Evelyn, 6 brilliant minds Tech Vantage had foolishly cast aside, now stepping into the next chapter with heads held high and futures finally in their own hands. I met them outside the elevators. And for a moment, we just stood there, grinning at each other like kids about to pull off the greatest heist in history. No need for long speeches. We all knew what today meant. As we gathered around the massive conference table upstairs, sketching out plans, brainstorming improvements, tossing ideas back and forth like we were breathing the same air again, I realized something that hit deeper than anything else so far. It wasn't just about winning. It was about building something that couldn't be taken away. Because it was built on trust, respect, and the kind of fire you can't manufacture in a boardroom. Meanwhile, over at Tech Vantage, the unraveling had turned into a free fall. Their internal development timeline was a fantasy. And everybody knew it. Rumors of mass resignations were swirling. Major clients were hesitating, pulling contracts, demanding answers nobody could give. Their stock price kept sinking, inch by inch, like a slow, inevitable drowning. Miguel forwarded me an email he'd intercepted through the grapevine, an emergency board memo admitting that without a licensing deal, Tech Vantage's core product, the very heart of their business, would be non-functional within months. Investors were demanding leadership changes. Lawsuits were already being drafted. Competitors were circling like sharks. The day I had been asked to leave with a cardboard box. Victor Lawson had looked at me like I was expendable, replaceable, invisible. Now, every decision he had made to silence me, every step he had taken to sideline me, was written across the wreckage of the company he once thought was untouchable. By Friday, the headlines were everywhere. Tech Vantage had officially signed a licensing agreement with Precision Systems. The terms were brutal, triple the industry standard fees, plus a mandatory public acknowledgement of my role as the algorithm's sole inventor. No spinning, no watering down, my name, front and center, in every statement they made moving forward. Greg dropped the press release onto my desk with a grin. Signed, sealed, delivered, he said, and they even spelled your name right. I leaned back, scanning the announcement, letting the moment sink into my bones. This wasn't just a business victory. It was a rewriting of the story they had tried to tell about me. They had written me out, erased my name, taken credit for my mind, my hands, my heart, and now, the industry, the clients, the investors, everyone, knew the truth. A few weeks later, I stood backstage at the National Technology Innovation Conference, adjusting the mic clipped to my jacket. The ballroom beyond the curtain was packed. Journalists, industry leaders, young engineers eager for a glimpse of the person behind the story they had followed with bated breath for months. I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying myself, letting the noise fade away. 1 year ago, almost to the day, I had sat in the audience at this same conference, watching Victor swagger across the stage, presenting my work as his own. I had sat in the back, nameless and invisible, clapping politely as he soaked in the applause. Not today. Today, they called my name. As I walked onto the stage, the applause hit me like a physical wave. Not polite, not perfunctory, real, raw, earned. I stepped up to the podium, letting the moment settle before I spoke. Thank you, I began, my voice carrying clear and steady across the room. Today, I'm here to talk about something bigger than algorithms or patents. I'm here to talk about ownership. About recognition, about the simple truth that innovation isn't born in boardrooms or quarterly reports. It's born in late nights, in passion, in persistence, and it deserves to be honored. I didn't mention Tech Vantage by name. I didn't have to. Everyone knew. Instead, I talked about building a culture where ideas are protected, where contributors are valued not just for what they produce, but for who they are. where nobody has to fight just to be seen. Afterward, as the crowd filtered out into the lobby, a line of young women engineers, and a few young men too, formed around me. Clutching notebooks, business cards, wide-eyed with hope and ambition. One of them, barely out of college, said quietly, "Your story made me realize I don't have to stay quiet when something feels wrong." I smiled, feeling that ache again, the one that never quite went away. Not sadness, not bitterness, something more complicated, a kind of bittersweet knowing. Change never comes cleanly. It costs something, it scars something, but sometimes, scars are just proof you fought for something worth having. A few months later, Precision Systems released the first wave of products built entirely on the new, evolved version of my algorithm. Faster, smarter, more powerful than anything TechVantage could even dream of now. Our market share soared. Our name became synonymous with innovation. And me? I wasn't hidden behind the curtain anymore. I was on the patents. I was on the keynote stages. I was the story now. One evening, close to sunset, Greg walked into my office holding a sleek envelope. He handed it to me with a knowing look. Inside was an invitation, the Women in Technology Leadership Summit, asking me to deliver the opening keynote on the topic, Owning Your Innovation, How One Story Changed an Industry. I ran my thumb over the embossed lettering, feeling a strange, full-circle kind of peace settle into my chest. Greg leaned against the doorframe. "You've become a legend. You know," he said, "they're teaching your story in MBA programs. How not to lose your innovators." I laughed softly, setting the invitation down. "It was never about revenge," I said, almost to myself. "It was about being seen. About showing them that ideas have names. That the people who build empires deserve to have their names carved into the stone. Not erased from the credits." Greg raised an imaginary glass. "To making damn sure they never forget it." I smiled, turning toward the wide windows as the last light of the day caught the skyline on fire. At 56, I had finally found what had always been missing, not just a seat at the table, but the nameplate that belonged there all along. And this time, no one could take it away. Not ever again.